Before we put a bunch of empty pages into our app, let's take a look at the basic application structure for our screen navigation. The My Teams page is going to serve as our root homepage. We'll allow users to save favorite teams, and they'll appear here almost like bookmarked teams. Any team we designate as a favorite will appear on the My Teams page, and we can tap that team to jump directly to the team detail page for that team. Once we're on the team detail screen, we can navigate to the game screen for any of the games that are on that team's schedule. These three screens will be the heart of the app. But let's suppose we need to first find a team. In that case, we'll go to the Find a Tournament screen, and we can select a tournament and then go to the Teams page to find a particular team in our selected tournament. From that page, we can select a team to go to the team detail for that team, where we can then choose whether or not to designate them as a favorite. Before we even get into implementing navigation, we first need to generate several pages for these screens. Let's start with the My Teams page, since we know that's going to serve as the home page for our app. So we'll go into the Pages directory, and I'm going to do a new folder, and we're going to call it My Teams. Let's put a couple of files in this folder. The first one will say myteams.page.ts. This is the TypeScript file that's going to serve as our component. Let's also generate a corresponding HTML page. Now you can see I've just put some very basic scaffolding in here. We have an Ion header with an Ion navbar. We have a title in here. We have a content placeholder. For the My Teams page, we just have a component. It's an empty class with an empty constructor. We'll fill in the details as we go. Now the next screen I want to create is the Tournaments page. Now there's a couple of ways to generate these screens, and in fact, the Ionic CLI gives you some functionality for generating these pages. I want to show you an example of that. I'm going to come in here and type Ionic, but this time generate page, and we'll call it Tournaments. And you can see that it created these three files for us: an HTML, a TypeScript file, similar to what you saw me do for the Teams page, and also a Sass file. And it gives you this helpful message: don't forget to put the Sass file in your app.core Sass file. Let's go see what it generated. You can see that we now have this folder down here called Tournaments. If we open HTML, we can see very similar to what I created for the My Teams page. Tournaments.ts, same thing, very similar, empty class with a constructor that's injecting a nav controller. Now this is all well and good, and I highly recommend you use the Ionic generator if it helps you gain efficiencies. There's a couple of things in it that you may grow a little tired of, which is these helpful comments are great in the beginning, but then as you keep going, you may not want to see these comments all the time. There's also some extra white space in here. Also, it might have a different convention for file names than what you have. For example, I explicitly name each component with a dot page. You might have seen this, and it didn't do it down here, although it did actually name it Tournaments page inside the class. If you want to use this convention, it's fine. If you want to use a convention slightly different, like the one I'm using, that's also fine. You should do what makes you happy here. Let me close these pages. I'm going to show you yet another alternative. You can use a Yeoman generator. I'm going to CD into this app folder, and specifically CD into my pages folder. And I'm going to use a Yeoman generator that I just use locally, SM for Steve Michelotti. And then I have a subgenerator called Ionic page, and I'm going to generate a Teams page. And you can see it just generated these multiple files. Now, if you've never used Yeoman before, I have an entire Pluralsight course dedicated just to this topic. So you can view that course and learn how to build your own custom Yeoman generators. To show all the Yeoman generators here would be beyond the scope of this course, but again, I have an entire Pluralsight course dedicated to it. But let's see what was just generated with the Teams page. We can see the Teams folder was generated. I have the teampage.ts. It's got an empty class, no extraneous comments. Team page HTML, generated exactly how I want to see it implemented. It follows my preferred naming convention, which is to put the dot page in the file name. But again, you can do these however you want. Let's go generate a few others. I'm actually going to delete the Tournaments folder that was previously generated by the Ionic tool. And let's generate a few pages. We'll generate the Tournaments page. Then we'll generate the team detail page. Next, the game page. You can see we're starting to generate a whole bunch of pages in here. In fact, let's delete page 1 and 2 because that was just there from the default project template. And because we deleted page 1 and 2, we have to come in here and delete these 2 lines. I'll just leave these commented for now so we can see what the syntax looks like. Another thing I highly recommend to do is in the Pages folder, you want to create a new file called pages.ts. This is going to make your life a lot easier when you do your imports. And what you can see here is I've exported each one of the components that's in the 5 screens that I just created. This is going to make your life easier when you're doing imports of a certain page. And let me show you an example of that right now. We're going to go into our app.ts file, and you can see we're getting the red squiggles because page 1 and 2 no longer exist. So let's just remove those. And I'm going to put a new import in here. And we'll say .pages. That's that pages.ts file I just used. And now you can see we're getting IntelliSense for the different pages we have in there. So I'm going to say the My Teams page. We're also going to remove this pages array down here on line 15. And the root page is now going to be My Teams page. And we need to remove the array here as well. Finally, let's go into the app.html. And I'm just going to change where it says menu, and we're going to call it Elite Schedule. Now that we've actually put these page skeletons in place, now we're ready to actually implement navigation.